Before I get into methods to help you get better sleep, I want to make one thing very clear. There is not, I repeat, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You're going to find a lot of resources online and a lot of people saying, you got to do this, you got to do that. Everyone is on the bell curve somewhere, a normal distribution like you see here on the screen. There's some people who can drink an energy drink before they go to bed and get perfect sleep. And there's people who struggle with it like their life depends on it, okay? We're all at different points on this sleep journey. Some of us struggle more than others. What I'm hoping to do in the remainder of this video is not give you a recipe to get better sleep, but to give you some ideas of things that if you're not doing these, or in some cases you are doing them, maybe some bad habits, maybe consider not doing those things and make some important changes in your sleep hygiene in the process of you getting ready to go to bed. Okay? And then at the end of the video, I'm going to circle back and give you what I feel are the biggest bang for your buck changes that you can make today and over the next week, over the next month, to try and get better sleep so that you can be the healthiest version of yourself. Tip number one for improving your sleep quality long term is establishing a regular sleep schedule. This is big. What this means is that you go to bed at the same time every single night. You get up at the same time every single morning. So what that might look like, hypothetically, is you might go to bed at 10:30 p.m. every night and get up at 6:30 a.m. every single morning. That is true whether it's a work day of the week or if it's the weekend. Now, for me, for example, my work week is Monday through Friday, and the weekends are Saturday and Sunday. So for example, Wednesday night, that's part of the work week, I would go to bed at 10:30 p.m. and get up at 6:30 a.m. If it's the weekend, so Saturday night, I go to bed at 10:30 p.m., get up at 6:30 a.m. Might seem a little bit ridiculous, but one of the things that you're doing is you're establishing consistency in your own circadian rhythm. One of the biggest things that will cause a lot of sleep disturbances long term is having big fluctuations in the time that you go to bed and the time that you get up in the morning. If you're somebody who struggles with sleep, I highly recommend starting some consistency in when you go to bed and when you get up. Now, everybody's work week and weekends might be different, but that doesn't matter. Establish a consistent, regular sleep schedule. This long term will lead to better rest quality, more hours spent asleep, and feeling more rested when you get up. So if I look at that time frame of sleep between 10:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., that's exactly 8 hours of sleep. Most of the current literature suggests that people need on average between 7 and 9 hours of sleep to function optimally long term. But again, just like there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to how to get better sleep, there's also a lot of variance in how many hours particular people need per night. And there's a lot of factors that go into this. Genetics for one, but also on what you're doing throughout the day. If you're doing a lot of physical labor, or you're a bodybuilder and you're doing a lot of resistance training and muscles certainly need recovery, that might shift where your genetic need for sleep is if you weren't doing all that stuff to maybe being a little bit higher. Some people may need a little bit more than 8. Some people may need a little bit less than 8. There's some variance there. But generally speaking, 8 hours, if you shoot for that, that's a good target, okay? Now, particularly for somebody who already is struggling with getting sufficient high quality sleep, this regular sleep schedule may be very difficult at first. Let's say you're doing the 10:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. schedule. You might find that you just lay in bed for a couple hours and can't get to sleep. And then maybe you do get to sleep. Maybe you wake up a couple of times during the night and you don't feel like you're completely rested then. That's okay. You do that again the next day. And maybe it's the same thing that next day. And maybe it's the same thing for a week, but you find over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that your brain starts to recognize, hey, this is a schedule. I'm going to get on board with this schedule. And maybe instead of laying in bed for 2 hours, trying to get to sleep, maybe it's only 1 hour. Maybe instead of waking up 3 or 4 times during the night, you only wake up 1 to 2. And you just get used to this schedule over and over again until eventually you've mastered it. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Always remember that. Tip number 2, make your pre-bedtime routine more relaxing. So a lot of these are things to check off to make sure that you're not doing, but also some tips that might help certain people. But again, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. For example, in the hours leading up to bedtime, use dim lights, if any, in the areas of regular travel. So what this means is as you're approaching the time that you would go to bed, don't have a bunch of overhead lights on that are shining a lot of light down, okay? Start to turn some of those off in favor of dimmer lights. Because remember, the more light that's entering your eyes, the more that you're telling your pineal gland to stop producing and releasing melatonin, which you need to get adequate sleep. So limit the use of your phone, your iPad, the computer, watching TV, particularly really close to it if it's really bright screen. Limit those things in the hours before you're going to bed. Now, when it comes to sleep time, there is nothing wrong with using a nightlight like this one, but consider a couple things. Number one, recall back to one of the slides that we saw earlier in the video, and the pigments in the retina of the eye that ultimately send signals to the pineal gland to suppress melatonin synthesis and release, they are most sensitive to wavelengths that correspond to blue in the visible spectrum. So of all the colors I could use, blue is actually most likely to stimulate that pathway and inhibit melatonin's release. So maybe consider, instead of blue, using a red color. Red can still have some effect, but it's going to have much less than blue. It's pretty far on that visible spectrum away from those wavelengths that stimulate those proteins. And also consider not having the light quite as bright. Maybe take it a little bit dimmer so it's not emitting quite as much light and potentially interfering with that melatonin pathway. Avoid very mentally stimulating activities, especially those that are potentially agitating. Starting or continuing a new project. Don't do that if you're trying to get better sleep. The news. There's no question the news a lot of times is very depressing and potentially agitating. Don't watch the news in the hours before you go to bed, because if you're agitated, that's probably going to interfere with your ability to get restful sleep. Or reading an interesting book. That might seem counterintuitive. If the book is really interesting, it's going to stimulate you mentally. We don't want to be super mentally stimulated when we're trying to actually go to bed, right? You might read a book that actually puts you to sleep, if that's something that helps, but not a super interesting book, okay? And engage in intentionally relaxing behavior. Some people may find that a warm bath is very helpful. Listening to calming ambiance music in the background, light yoga, stretching. Again, that may not work for everybody. For some people, yoga can be very engaging to the muscles and very engaging to the mind. Maybe for those individuals, it's not so good. But if yoga or things like that, stretching, helps you relax, by all means, give that a shot, okay? Now, making certain dietary modifications toward the end of the day. I'm not sitting here to tell you to do one diet or the next, but there's certain things that you can certainly try to get better sleep. Avoiding caffeine after a certain point in the day. So if this was 7 p.m. and I got my coffee here, it's not 7 p.m., but if it was, maybe I'd be best not actually drinking that coffee then. Maybe if you know that you are very affected by caffeine, you should have a certain cutoff time. For example, noon. And that cutoff time may vary a lot between people. Like I said, some people are very unaffected by caffeine. Some people are very affected by the effects of caffeine. You kind of just have to see what works best for you. Avoid alcohol before bed. This is counter to what a lot of people think. A lot of people think that because alcohol tires you, makes you woozy, right, that it's a good sleep agent. But actually counter to that, alcohol disrupts the sleep-wake cycle, and it can actually lead to you not getting as deep of sleep into those non-REM types of sleep that we've talked about in other videos. And it can lead to you feeling less rested in the morning. Also, a lot of times when people drink before going to bed, they wake up earlier than they would normally intend on waking up. So maybe you normally wake up at 8 a.m. You might wake up at 5 a.m., or if you normally get up at 6 a.m., you might wake up at 4 a.m. before the intended time that you would normally get up. And that extra couple of hours of sleep would have made a big difference had you not actually consumed the alcohol before bed. Also, avoiding heavy meals before bed, especially those with spicy food. Again, some people may find eating meals before bed not a bad thing. In fact, some people may find it actually improves their sleep, but there are some individuals where it can dramatically affect the quality of their sleep. So you might try limiting how much you eat before bed. Maybe if you're going to bed at 10 p.m., maybe have your cutoff time for food 6 p.m. It can be a tough thing to get used to, but if it works for you, it works. Tip number 4, make your in-bed routine more relaxing. So you're already in bed, you're now wanting to go to sleep. What can you do? Well, you can make sure that your room is not too warm. A lot of people are like, I want to be cozy and have a nice warm room. But actually, for a lot of people, that can disrupt the quality of sleep. Realistically, whatever room temperature is, the temperature should be a little bit lower than that, actually a little more on the cool side to promote high quality sleep. One of the things that your body has to do in order to get into the deep parts of sleep is your body temperature actually has to drop. If you're in a really warm room, your body temperature is going to have a harder time dropping, and it's going to make it harder to fall and stay asleep. So your best bet is actually to have the room a little bit cooler, not so cold that you're shivering, of course, but cooler than room temperature was during the day. That will help your body cool down more, help it relax more, and you'll be better able to get into those deeper parts of the sleep cycle like non-REM sleep, okay? Diaphragmatic breathing. I have an entire video where we talk about breathing methods. And just laying on your back in bed, inhaling through your nose, blow out the candle. For patients of mine that have trouble going to sleep, a lot of these are your chronic pain type of patients, a lot of patients with temporomandibular dysfunction, so jaw pain, very common with this. I often teach diaphragmatic breathing and I tell them, do this while you're in bed. And believe it or not, there's a number of patients, a pretty good number, that actually respond really well to that. It's not a quick fix, but as we start addressing some of these things pertaining to stress management and just letting go of things during the day and focusing on breathing like that can actually get your body to relax to the point where you have an easier time falling asleep and staying asleep. Diaphragmatic breathing seems simple, but it is so useful for a lot of people, not even just before bed, but also during the day. And we'll talk about that whenever we get into our stress management video. Use white noise, ASMR, or other relaxing background ambiance. Me personally, I'm particularly a big fan of ASMR. I often have my phone plugged in and I got headphones in and I'll use that. And I find that on the rare circumstances that I'm just having trouble sleeping, ASMR tends to help a lot. Okay? Can be very useful for a lot of people. And here's an odd one. Consider not sleeping in the supine position. Supine position is on your back. And we're taught that sleeping on your back is the best position to sleep. I don't know if I buy that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you have to dramatically change your sleeping position, because that can actually disrupt sleep more because it takes time to get used to a new sleeping position. However, if you've tried a lot of things and you sleep on your back and you just can't sleep, you might try switching to side lying or prone on your stomach, or somewhere between side lying and prone. A lot of people have said, oh, prone sleeping is bad on your neck. I've never seen any convincing evidence of that. I've known plenty of people, including myself, who are stomach sleepers, and we don't have any neck problems, okay? I think that's kind of just an old wives' tale. It's not bad for your neck. The best sleeping position is the one that you can sleep the best in. But the thing about the supine position is, if you think of the level of awareness that you would have in the supine position, go ahead, try this out. Get on the floor, lay on your back, and think, what do I have the awareness of? Well, even if you close your eyes, you're kind of aware of everything because you're facing upward, right? If you roll onto one side, now what do you have the awareness of? You've essentially cut it in half, right? Because one of your eyes might actually be sort of kind of into the mattress a little bit, and you've essentially cut your visual field in half. So the level of awareness that you have drops to about 50%, give or take. If I go totally prone and have my face buried in the pillow, now I have essentially awareness of none of that, because my eyes, even if I open them, would just be into the pillow. So I'm not saying that you have to dramatically change your sleeping position. In fact, that's one of the last things I would change before you try any of these other things. But some people have a lot of luck switching out of supine to one of those other positions because it cuts your awareness down quite significantly, in fact. Tip number 5, consider taking a supplement. The first one on there is magnesium. You should be able to purchase a magnesium supplement either online or in any grocery or drugstore, but I feel like magnesium is a pretty low bang for your buck type of intervention. There's certainly a lot of low grade evidence on it. It's certainly not A+ or S tier level evidence for magnesium, but if it works for you, great. Maybe a better one to try would actually be a melatonin supplement. Melatonin, if you have trouble sleeping, melatonin is one of the primary regulators of it. For a lot of people, melatonin can be very useful for getting a deeper sleep. And that you can just get over the counter in any one of the 50 states here, and presumably in other countries, I assume you should be able to get melatonin as well. Now the last one on there, for the sake of YouTube being YouTube, I'm not going to name it, but you can read it there. This is obviously only available in certain states within the United States, so I'm of course only addressing those states right now. Don't do anything illegal, of course. But this particular supplement, if you are in a state where it's legal, yes, you have to be careful with it because, again, it can cause, balance issues when it makes you loopy, right? And that could lead to a fall if you're a fall risk individual. But for those individuals where we're not considering any of those things, or you take it once you're already in bed, there's a lot of evidence that it can be very beneficial for helping you get to sleep and staying asleep. And then tip number 6, exercise during the day. Exercise can take on many different forms. It could be resistance training, if that's something you enjoy. It could be different types of aerobic exercise like basketball, tennis, racquetball, or just simply going outside and going for a walk in nature, getting some vitamin D coming from the sun, right? All that good stuff. I find that a lot of the individuals that I treat in the clinic who have chronic sleep issues are also ones that do not engage in regular exercise. And I'm not saying that you have to be Usain Bolt. You don't have to be Michael Jordan or anyone like that. But just engaging in, let's say, the recommended dosage for adults getting regular physical activity can make a world of difference. Now, you do want to make sure that you're not doing particularly vigorous exercise in the few hours before you go to bed. A lot of people may find that if you do a heavy resistance training circuit before you go to bed, you're still going to be wired from that and not be able to get adequate sleep. So you want to make sure that you're doing that exercise either in the morning or at the latest, maybe the early evening, late afternoon, but certainly not right before you go to bed because it could disrupt sleeping. But again, getting involved in regular exercise, oh my gosh, this is foundational for getting good sleep. Now, circling back, there is no shortage of tips you might find online for getting better sleep. And there's certainly some that I have not mentioned here. There's too many to talk about in one video. But if I had to give you the 2 most probable big bang for your buck things that every person should try before they start tweaking little individual things, it would be these 2 right here. Number 1, establishing a regular sleep schedule. Normalizing that circadian rhythm. Go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. And exercising during the day, getting the recommended dosage at least of exercise every single day. Now, if you just do this one time and you don't see a difference, you can't conclude anything. But think of sleep more like bodybuilding. If you go into the gym one time, do some sets of bicep curls, your biceps didn't get bigger, and you're like, oh, that didn't work, bicep curls don't do anything, you'd be a fool, right? You have to be consistent. Building big muscles and getting them to grow and get stronger takes time, it takes consistency, and it takes discipline. I would challenge you, for whoever is struggling with sleep, whether it's you, a client, a patient, a family member, whoever it is, give these couple of things at the minimum a try for 1 to 2 months. And really see how much improvement you make in your sleep. But you've got to treat sleep like a muscle group. Like you got leg day, you got back day, biceps, right? You've got to prioritize sleep, just like you prioritize anything else that's important. It's not just something that you just do at the end of the day, it just happens, right? This is important stuff, and you have to be consistent and you have to be disciplined when it comes to it. And if you do those things, the probability that you are going to get better sleep and be able to rise triumphant over a lot of these things like comorbidities, chronic diseases, increases substantially. So hopefully this video gave you some tips and gave you some hope for whoever it is that you know, whether it's yourself or someone else, for getting better sleep. Because the better sleep that you get, the better your life quality is going to be. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification button for notifications for all videos in the future. Thank you so much.